Armenia, a Christian country for 1700 years that once had influence far beyond its present borders. A country of mountains, monasteries and very friendly people.
Let me show you some of the wonders of this incredible country, Armenia.
Welcome to my country, Armenia.
Բարի գալուստ, Հայաստան.
The first wonder of this film is colourful, edible, and one of the most popular symbols of Armenia, the humble pomegranate.
Everywhere you go in Armenia, you'll be tempted by fresh pomegranate juice. And I can guarantee you, it's always absolutely delicious.
But it's the churches and monasteries that people most associate with the landscape and culture of Armenia. A short drive north of the capital Yerevan, you'll find the monastery complex of Kecharis. The main church here was erected in the year 1003 and dedicated to Gregory the Illuminator, who introduced Christianity to the Armenians. It was badly damaged in the Mongol invasions of the 13th century, but swiftly restored.
In the grounds of the complex stands a stunningly intricate Kachar, erected in 2015 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide. In its heyday, the complex would have dominated the surrounding area. Alas, in the 21st century, it's becoming dominated by an enormous ski resort that's growing and growing all around it. Now it's time to brave the Tsaghkadzor ropeway, the longest chairlift in Armenia.
Tsaghkadzor is Armenia's premier ski resort. The slopes of Mount Tegenis were used by Olympic skiers to train back in the Soviet era.
In a few weeks' time, this will all be covered by snow. I'm not quite prepared for that, so I'm heading down again.
The cool mountain air gives me time to think about food. An Armenian dinner table is not complete without the unleavened flatbread known as lavash. And it always tastes better when you've had the opportunity to see it being baked in the traditional oven. Now we head north towards the Georgian border.
Now, pilgrims back in the day kept it simple when it came to distinguishing between the various monasteries of the region. Haghpat simply means huge wall. I told you they kept it simple.
UNESCO considered the monastery to be of outstanding universal value and an exceptional example of the ecclesiastical architecture that developed in Armenia in the 10th to 13th centuries. Unique by virtue of its blending of elements of both Byzantine church architecture and the traditional vernacular building style of this region. The monastery was founded in 976 AD by King Ashot the Merciful and his wife, Queen Khosrovanush, and over the centuries has withstood both enemy attack from invading armies and numerous earthquakes.
The main cathedral part of the complex is over 1,000 years old. There's been a little bit of restoration, but on the whole, it's still almost entirely authentic.
From the green highlands of the north to the dry red canyons close to the border with the Azeri enclave of Nakhichevan.
It's hard to imagine a monastery in a more spectacular setting than Haghpat, but let me take you now to Noravank, which means new monastery in Armenian. But don't worry, in this case, new means very old.
Noravank is one of the country's most famous sites. The oldest part of the complex was developed in the 13th century by the Orbelians. The most distinctive church is also the newest, dating from 1339. The Mother of God Church actually sits on top of a mausoleum. When I first came here 7 years ago, tourists could still clamber up the dangerous stairs to the church, but not anymore. The oldest part of the complex, by the John the Baptist Church, contains a number of gravestones, with one bearing a rare lion's image symbolising a warrior perishing in battle. From Noravank it's a short drive to Areni Cave, officially known as Areni 1. The excavations in this cave have international importance. I'll leave the explanation to the expert, Eduard.
Well, this cave is important because it's actually one of the main archaeological stars of Armenia. Two very important discoveries were made here at the beginning of the 21st century, and excavation started in 2007 under the rule of the local archaeologist Boris Gasparyan. So two main findings were the oldest fully preserved piece of fully leather shoe in the world. It was so well preserved that it actually had its shoelaces on when it was found. It's nowadays kept in Armenia's historical museum, which is in the very center of Yerevan. And another important discovery here was one of the most ancient wineries in the whole world. It's in the inside part, in the inner part of the cave. And scientists knew the age of that winery thanks to very well preserved grape seeds, which were in one of those wine jugs. So when they tested their age, it turned out they are 6,200 years old. And they were found in these huge wine jugs, which were actually used in Armenia later for many centuries. They are called Kecharis in Armenian, like the most traditional, typical clay jug which was used in our culture to keep wine inside.
The nearby village of Areni is the centre of Armenia's wine industry. Founded in 2013, the Hyur Areni Winery now exports around the world from its state-of-the-art facility.
Now, having visited the brand new facility, I'm now going to visit the old Hyur Areni Winery and do some tasting. I imagine that this will taste far better than the wine made here 6,000 years ago. Here in Areni, the roadside stalls look like they're selling Coca-Cola or fruit juice in plastic bottles, but they're not, they're selling wine. The reason for the deception is that this is a popular route for truck drivers going to Iran. And of course, in Iran, alcohol is totally forbidden.
The next stop is a monastery that attracts a huge amount of visitors despite its small size. Haghpat is a short drive from Yerevan and sits beside the sealed border with Turkey.
When I first visited Haghpat a number of years ago, it was impossible to see Ararat because of the cloud. I hoped I might have better luck this time. After all this week I've been able to see distant Ararat from Yerevan. But this morning, alas, the mountain remains stubbornly hidden.
This is the incredible view of Mount Ararat that you can enjoy from Haghpat on an elusive, clear and sunny day. Oh well, maybe next time. Haghpat in Armenian means deep dungeon. In this case, a miserable dungeon where Gregory the Illuminator was held captive for 13 years during the 3rd century. In 2016, Pope Francis visited and, in a symbolic gesture, released a dove towards Mount Ararat.
Throughout its history, Armenia, in its various forms, has had a number of capitals. Yerevan is number 12. In the barren hills to the north of Khorvirap was the site of one of the ancient capitals, Artashat. The nearby town of Artashat carries the same name, but this was built during the communist period and is something entirely different.
There's just time for a quick pomegranate juice before our next stop on the shores of Lake Sevan, Armenia's inland sea. Sevanank is one of the nation's most popular monasteries.
Once upon a time, the monastery sat on an island, but thanks to yet another example of Soviet environmental destruction, you can now drive to it. But at least the water is still crystal clear.
As I clamber up to the monastery, here's Arpine to explain its historical importance.
So, Sevan Monastery, Sevanank, the foundation of which dates back to the 9th century. Though the first monks had arrived here in the 7th century, and they decided to stay and to found a monastery, which was composed of several churches and monk premises and other monk cells and other premises. But unfortunately, 2 churches have survived: the Church of 12 Apostles and the Church of John the Baptist. So nowadays, Sevanank is famous for its very important relic, that is Armenian crossstone, that we call it All Savior crossstone. Well, Armenian crossstones, a unique cultural heritage of Armenia. No other culture has got this phenomenon. Maybe this is the reason why art of Armenian crossstones is one of the elements of the UNESCO list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity in Armenia. There are thousands of them around the world, not only around Armenia, but only 20 of them are referred to as All Savior ones, and one of them is inside the Church of 12 Apostles of Sevanank Monastery.
In the height of summer, Sevanank can be rammed with tourists and also blisteringly hot, which is why I'm visiting in the middle of November.
If you come here in the summer, you should also factor in the temperatures, which can reach a suffocating 40 degrees centigrade. And finally on to the beating heart of the nation, Yerevan, one of my favourite capital cities, where you can enjoy everything from the ballet to Armenia's famous brandy.
Oh, that is a great smell.
You'll find my top 10 guide to Yerevan on a separate film on this channel.
This was my second visit to Armenia, and I certainly hope that it won't be the last. My special thanks to Arpine and to Edward of Hyur Service, in my opinion the best tour company in Armenia. And if you want to see more films about Armenia and also neighbouring Georgia, then stay on the channel and please subscribe. I'll see you again soon.